My name is Andy Fellows. I was born on the 15th of July 1993. I'm bisexual, genderqueer and married to a genderqueer woman. I'm from the UK and I'm currently living in Mexico. And I'm an atheist. This is a story of my faith and how I lost it. When I was a kid, I wasn't taught to believe anything. I wasn't taken to church. I wasn't read any old books. I was aware of religion, but I wasn't raised on it. My grandparents spanned the religiosity spectrum from kinda religious all the way to zealously religious. And I attended a Church of England school until my preteen years. Hymns, Bible stories, nativities at Christmas, that was all quite normal. When I visited one particular set of grandparents' Watchtower magazines and Awake magazines, the mind-moulding tools of the Jehovah's Witnesses were never far from being whipped out. But I never really believed in any particular God. Fast forward to around 2009, I'm in college, I'm studying music. I'm reading a book about Buddhism that my girlfriend at the time had just finished reading. I can still remember sitting in the library reading the book cover to cover. One of the only books I've actually read cover to cover. That book started me on a long path. From Buddhism I got into Taoism, and in Taoism I found the first idea of God that I could really get on board with. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. For the uninitiated, it's like the Force in Star Wars. I like that idea, and I carried it with me for a while thereafter. Something that I should say now is that I'm an addict, and the fact that I'm an addict has had a large impact on my life, on the choices I make, and how I deal with the different things that happen to me. I spent a long time smoking way too much weed to have a functional life, and since then I've worked hard on building a life that is healthy and good for me. The fact that I'm an addict is important when I tell this story. When you get past Buddhism and Taoism into the other stuff that I got into, the fact that I'm an addict and the all or nothing tendencies that come with being an addict play quite a large part in my choices and the way I ended up living. If you're at all familiar with the subculture around weed in the UK, there's a lot of mistrust in the system and the government. I think that's probably true of a lot of the weed-centric subcultures around the world. But part of that is that you alienate yourself from the people around you and their worldview. You see things differently, you relate to things differently, you treat things differently, and so there's always like a gap between you and the people around you. I'm not knocking weed here, by the way. I have nothing against it. It can be a great part of some people's lives. I don't think that I will be able to have it in my life in a way that's not destructive, given the fact that I am an addict, but no, nothing against it. Just wanted to be clear about that. Around this time, 2010, 2011, I was smoking a lot of weed, making a lot of music and watching a lot of content about conspiracy theories. It sounds unrelated to spirituality and faith, but it does link up, trust me. I think if there's any mindset that has more in common with a religious mindset, it's the conspiracy theory mindset. There's a lot of suppositions, a lot of claims, not a lot of facts. So fast forward to 2012, a friend of mine died. And we'd known each other since we were like 14, something like that. We lost contact for a while and then reconnected in college because we coincidentally ended up on the same college course. Her death hit me pretty hard. I won't go into all the details here, but I spoke to her about a fortnight before she died, and she said she wanted to see me. I said I was busy. I wasn't that busy. I just wanted to smoke a lot of weed and be on my own, which was quite normal around that time. But that phone call and the fact that I didn't see her kind of stuck with me for a while afterwards. And also add to that the fact that this is like the first time in my life that I had really dealt with death in like a real sense, you know. I was grieving and I didn't know what to do. So I watched documentaries, lots of documentaries, History Channel documentaries. Those documentaries, aliens, lots of aliens. I went down the rabbit hole. I went deep down the rabbit hole, and when I exhausted YouTube, I went on to Facebook and I just said, hey, I'm looking for documentaries ancient aliens, conspiracy theories, that kind of thing. Anybody got anything good? And I got a reply. Spirit science. Let's pause a minute. So up until this point, spirituality, God, religion, none of that had really made it into my daily life. It had been like a curiosity, it had been something I'd been interested in, but it had never really made it into the way I was thinking all the time until spirit science. So Spirit Science was this kind of animated series based on this book called The Flower of Life by Dreamville Melchizedek, and it kind of brought all of these sort of mythological kind of post-Christian ideas and wrapped them up into this kind of outlandish philosophy. I mean, we're talking pyramids, Atlantis, aliens, ascension, energy, crystals, all that kind of stuff, and it was made into this just this kind of coherent worldview. And over the first 2 days, since I discovered Spirit Science, I just watched everything that was available on Spirit Science, and then I started looking at the other stuff that the guy Jordan, who had made Spirit Science, had made, and I found a video he did with this woman called Teal. Now Teal, I mean, to look at, she's a pretty woman. She's got dark hair, long dark hair. She's got these bright eyes, and you know, if you're attracted to women and you see a woman like that, you go, oh, okay. And so you start listening, and I started listening, and I was like, I'm intrigued, I'm interested in what she has to say. So I click onto her channel, I start watching her videos. The best way to describe Teal's videos is hypnotizing escapism for people that feel lonely, suicidal, depressed, and want to feel relief from that, want to feel part of something. Sounds great on the surface. I watched a lot of her videos. I was absorbed in them. I looked at all the interviews she did and started to read her blog post. I ordered her book and I read that from cover to cover. Another book I read from cover to cover. I apparently did more reading in this part of my life than I'd ever done prior or since. The sheer volume of content of hers that I consumed at this point, again, I think kind of down to this all or nothing addictive tendency, was enough to mean that when she was in an interview and someone asked her a question, I knew what the answer was going to be before she even answered it herself. And the way that she talked and the inflections she used and the terms she used, I'd absorbed it all and started speaking like that myself. I joined her Facebook group, Teal Tribe, and met a lot of other people who, to varying extents, had also become hooked and who'd also begun to kind of model her behaviour and the way she talked. And I mean, that's quite common with this sort of thing. There's a leader and everybody sort of starts to use their terminology and so on and so forth. What I didn't realise at this point was that this was a cult. It's not a cult in like the traditional sense of the word. There's not necessarily any consequences for leaving. Obviously you do kind of get shunned when you leave, and if you speak out against her, then like everyone swarms on you and gives you hell, and that's happened a few times to a few other people. But each and every person that finds the YouTube videos is subjected to a process, and it's a process designed to target depressed, suicidal people, people that feel lonely, people like in my position that grieving and have struggled with mental health issues their whole life. And it's a slow, gradual process of, in a sense, self-indoctrination, based on the content, based on the community, based on all the stuff that's associated with Teal. So soon how I talked, how I acted, what I thought about the world, how I dealt with things that happened to me had all been kind of hijacked by this new worldview. And I believed it, I fully believed it all. It was around this time that I started my blog, which I still do today, although I've written less and less recently. And I also started a YouTube channel, not this one. This one came a bit later. The bedrock of this new ideology was you're a powerful creator You are the universe experiencing itself subjectively. You are God incarnate. And also the law of attraction. In a word, your thoughts create your reality. Following Teal's advice, inside a year I ended the relationship I was in. I moved out, I started travelling around, made my way to London, met a lot of people, great people actually. I do want to say that pretty much all the people that I met while I was involved in this cult are fucking amazing people. They're lovely people, they're really kind, they're considerate, they're intelligent people. But of course, for it to even be possible that they were subjected to the process to have been indoctrinated in the way that were in this cult, there's obviously a lot of pain there. There's mental health issues there. But yeah, these are the loveliest people. And when I arrived in London, intending to go to the workshop, I didn't have enough money because I'd spent more money than I'd intended getting there. And a bunch of really lovely people put some money together to pay for my ticket to Teal's workshop. And I mean, that was a really lovely gesture, and I'm actually really grateful even today that they did that. Aside from it being a nice gesture, it kind of foreshadowed the fact that the mindset I had at the time didn't really work great when it came to money and setting your life up in a way that was predisposed towards happiness and health, if you like. And of course that had a knock-on effect as things went on. So by the time I had finished at the workshop and everything, I'd gone back to my mum's house because I had nowhere else to go, crashed on her sofa, and I was still very much in the cult at this time, so I was still taking on all this new material, talking in a certain way, acting in a certain way, all that kind of thing. And empowered by everything that I thought I knew, I started coaching. It was more like unqualified spiritual counselling. And I worked with a few people that I really hope I helped. If you can hear like in the background, that is one of our cats. The water bowl is right there, and he's decided now's the time. Shortly after getting back to my mum's, I met my now wife, Rosa. We started talking every day on Skype. I was in England, she was here in Mexico, and we had these long Skype calls way into the night. I was much more into Teal than Rosa was, and as I was explaining these kind of Teal-esque ideas, so I would say these Teal-esque things, she would ask me what I meant, and I'd have to explain. And as I was explaining, as we were talking about it, I think we both started to notice that there were some things that didn't quite add up, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And at this time, I set up residence in my mum's utility room. Being up late nights and talking to Mexico on Skype meant that waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning because my little brother wanted to watch cartoons in the living room on the sofa that I was sleeping on wasn't the best thing. So my mum's house didn't really have room for me, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. So one day, in a mental health slump, I took up residence in her utility room, which was slightly too small for a person of my height. And that kind of became where I lived for a number of months. So remember that a lot of the decisions I was making at this point were informed by this philosophy that I had taken on. And so because of the way that the law of attraction was taught to me at the time, because of all the ideas that I was using to make my choices, there was a bit of a disconnect between the things that I needed and the things that I was prepared to do in order to get those things. You'll see what I mean as we carry on. Around the time that I moved into the utility room, I decided that I wanted to move to Mexico to be with Rosa. And that's a kind of lofty aim for someone who only really has enough income to sustain a slowly dying weed habit and doesn't have a passport. But with the help of the law of attraction and a few spiritual friends to align my soul, that was possible, right? I was able to do it, and boom, I was just here in Mexico. Yeah, no, not really. With the law of attraction as a foundation for my choices, I decided to start eating burritos every day to get myself into the vibrational frequency of Mexico. And in following some quite bad business advice, I decided to hike my prices in coaching to ridiculously high prices, like unaffordably high prices, and effectively scared away all the people that I was working with, and might have ended up working with. And I also started making videos about more psychological topics. Of the 3 choices I made around that time, the psychological videos are probably the best choice I made. And I mean, those are the videos that have got the most views on this channel, and they're still there. If you want to see some of them, I took most of them down, but some of them have got a lot of views, and it seems like they're helping people, so I wanted to leave them up. Which brings me to say, actually, if you're watching this video because you've watched one of those videos, thank you for the support. I really hope that I was able to help you, and I hope that your life is better now than what it was when you came to find those videos. Everything in those videos was said with 100% good intentions, and I you know, there may be some advice in there that's not great advice, but there may be some advice in there that is great advice, but it was all meant with the best of intentions, and I really hope that it helped you. Needless to say, very little of this law of attraction, this thoughts create your reality ideology, actually had a positive impact on where I was. I, after months, was still living in this utility room, still pining for Mexico, and now, thanks to eating burritos every day for months, shitting the hardest shits I've ever shat in my entire life. The best thing that happened during that time was the fact that Rosa gave me the support and the acceptance that I needed to quit smoking, and I haven't smoked since. So when I realised that the law of attraction and Thiel's teachings were defunct, I gave them all up and became an atheist. No, lol. Again, joking. Didn't... That would have been great if that happened, but no, there's still more. Instead of what is probably a more sensible choice, I decided to become a spiritual teacher. I decided to promote myself from coach to spiritual teacher, and yeah. I started making videos with my own teachings, and a lot of those teachings contradicted Thiel's teachings. So in a way, it was kind of my way of speaking out against what I'd learned wasn't great. Trying to, I guess, influence some of the people that were also still kind of in the community to think for themselves a little bit. And it wasn't really an activism effort as much as it was me trying to make sense of what the hell was happening to me. But in the end, it was kind of a bridge from thinking someone else's way to beginning to think for myself properly. But again, long path to that, and still a way to go yet. When I got here to Mexico, I started to organise groups where I would position myself as a kind of spiritual leader in a way, and get people together and talk about spiritual things. Started to talk with people one-to-one, started to make more videos. All the while, I was kind of wrestling with these new impossible standards that I imposed on myself. Because I was thinking, I'm a spiritual teacher now, I need to do so, I need to be a certain way, I need to act a certain way. And those standards started to kind of cage me. I started to feel like I had to be something that I wasn't. Which, if you think about it, was kind of already piggybacking off of what remained of the law of attraction idea. Because when you start to think that your thoughts create your reality, when you start to think that this little fucking like... just blur of random reactive nonsense that is our thoughts. When you think that that thing is changing everything in your environment, you can start to get pretty anxious and paranoid about it, because you're trying to control these things that are really fucking hard to control. And that kind of makes you tense and kind of controlling, and again, this impossible standards thing starts to play quite a large part in the way that you think, the way that you act, the way that you talk, the way that you allow yourself to feel. And that's a big one. Like, a lot of people talk about the law of attraction as being this thing, it's not about your thoughts, it's about how you feel. And I mean, I don't think necessarily it has any more relevance than the thought thing, but even so, I mean, that can be very destructive for someone that takes it quite seriously, you know, because you start thinking, oh shit, what if I feel this, it's going to make this thing happen, and so you're trying to constantly govern your thoughts and your feelings all the time. Meanwhile, in the back of my mind, doubt started to take hold. Soon I dropped the law of attraction altogether and started to speak out against it. And I started to listen to people like Ram Dass, Mooji, Eckhart Tolle around that time as well. And it was through listening to what they had to say that I had the first experience that at the time I would have said was an experience of God, like a personal connection with God in a way. The idea was that if you ask certain questions like who is the one thinking that thought and who is aware of the thoughts and things like that, that you would become... The way it's talked about is really difficult to explain in terms that are critical of it, which I suppose is intentional, but the idea is that without thoughts you are your true self. Without anything else happening, before the thoughts, before your feelings, before your experience, before your physical self, before everything, there is this awareness which it says is God, is your true self. A few months later, the expectations that I placed on myself as a spiritual teacher were too much. The effects on me were too much. They had really had quite a destructive effect on my relationship with myself, and they were beginning to affect my relationship with Rosa, which meant it had to go. And during that time as well, I had some criticism from some people which caused me to really think about what I was saying a little bit more. And although criticism's never pleasant, it's necessary. And so when I got that and started to question myself and started to feel a little less certain, that kind of broke the illusion that I was living in. After a brief stint of fascination with Norse mythology and what remains of the Celtic spiritual tradition, I came to a realization. Can you see this? I'm trying to talk and have like a normal conversation while these two are having a standoff in the background. They're not friends today. So the realization was, what if the only reason that I thought that this silence, this awareness that I'd experienced was God or my true self, was because I'd been told that that was what it was, that I'd been told that if I experienced this silence, if I experienced this true self, then I would be experiencing God, that I would be experiencing who I actually was, what I actually was. What if my mind had been silenced by a series of linguistic tricks which had been designed to do just that? Handy in meditation, but really probably not much more profound than that. The idea was that this awareness existed before any thoughts, any feelings, anything, including body, brain, and earth, and all of that kind of stuff. But how could I know that for sure if every time I experienced it, there was very much a body and very much a brain playing a part in that experience? How could I be certain that this experience wasn't the consequence of that brain, and therefore was God or was my true self or whatever in that moment I was being told it was? There was nothing to counter this, and I was left, ironically, in silence, very aware of the way that I had been thinking and the way that... I think this moment was the first moment I realised that maybe I had started to believe things without really critically thinking about them. Maybe I was, as I mentioned before, subjected to a process designed to have that effect, to cause that in me, to make me think and believe these things. And in the preceding years, I began to apply that same level of scrutiny to all my beliefs. One by one, I brought them under the microscope, and one by one, they fell away. Logic, scrutiny, skepticism were my tools, and with each of them in play, and with every dissolving belief, I found myself edging closer and closer to atheism. Fast forward to now, and I can say I'm open to being proven wrong, but nothing that any person that has any faith or any belief has said to me up until this point has given me cause to reconsider my position. Since learning to apply scrutiny and logic and skepticism to every new idea I'm exposed to, I've found myself pretty firmly in atheism. Agnostic atheism, but atheism all the same. So there we go. Atheism. That's how I found my faith, how I lost my faith, and how I ended up an atheist. If you liked this video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more stuff like this, as I will be starting to upload again on this channel with this kind of content, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell so that you'll get notified when I upload a new video. Thanks for watching.